Hey guys, just realized I still hadn't finished all the lectures for this week. uh, Moving on with the respiratory system. So we just finished up with the larynx as a part of the upper respiratory tract. Remember, that's your voice box. It's the separation. If you look over here between where the esophagus and the pharynx sends food down the esophagus and air goes down into the larynx. And so it's the first part of the true respiratory tract. Um, the next part is the trachea. The trachea is the tube that comes down from the larynx. It's made of cartilaginous rings, and rings I'll put in quotation marks because they're not completed rings. They're just C structures, and they have this um, muscular area in the back. And you'll see that in the picture. That allows food to go down the esophagus, and it kind of steals a little bit of room away from the trachea as that happens. That's why you can't eat and breathe at the same time. It's because they're separate. You need that separation there. Not true for all animals. If you want a little quick information, go Google those two terms, trachea and esophagus in reptiles, and you'll understand how snakes can eat. Pretty interesting. So there's the trachea, and again, you can see the esophagus going down behind it. And here's that cartilaginous C ring with the esophagus behind it. And this is that kind of muscular extension area where if you swallow something large, it can actually open up and steal some of this airspace from the trachea. Um, but for the most part, air is under such low pressure that it has to have these cartilaginous rings, which you can feel right here. You can feel all of the rings going down, just the voice box's hair, and then all of these tracheal rings that go down. And that's because air is such low pressure that, unlike blood that keeps its own muscular vessels open, these would collapse under the pressure of air. Moving on are the bronchi. The bronchi are the two major separations of the lungs. So as the lungs go down, the trachea splits and goes to your right and left lung. And these are the tubes that do that. They're made of the same types of cartilaginous rings, except these are completely round. They're full rings at this point. And then as the bronchi continue to split into bronchuses, left and right bronchus, secondary, primary, secondary, tertiary, all the splits, it makes what looks like a tree, because bronch literally means branching or splitting. And so this is what sometimes is called the respiratory tree, where the trachea is the trunk, the bronchi are all the branches. So that's kind of why that picture's there. Interesting idea, concept. It's actually one of those nerdy math fractal concepts where if you zoom into this branching here, it looks the same as the branching up here in the larger areas. And if you zoom into the branching at the very tiny spot, it looks the same as the branching up here at a larger spot. Just kind of a neat concept. Nature uses these repeating patterns. Off to the lungs. Okay, so the lungs are large, soft air sacs that contain all of your bronchioles, and which are very tiny, tiny tubes, and then literally means tiny branches, and then alveoli, which are the tiny air sacs where gas exchange actually happens. So if you look at them, the lungs are the functional part of the respiratory system where that exchange actually occurs, where oxygen comes in and gets diffused into the blood diffuses CO2 back into the lungs, and the lungs breathe the CO2 out, and they breathe higher density oxygen air in, and then breathe out higher amounts of CO2. And so that actual exchange occurs inside of the lungs. And all of that branching, that tracheal tree, respiratory tree, all of that branching is just to get as many of these alveoli as possible in the space of your chest cavity. And so it's just about maximizing the space available. Right. And again, there they are. Alveoli, little grape-like packages. All right.